are joined today by
J.R. Romano.
Hey, everybody. J.R. Romano here. Today, joining us, Peter Schiff had reached out to me. Peter and I have been longtime friends. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the policies that have been recently passed in the Connecticut session. It actually is a pretty long and substantial interview, so it should be exciting. But as always, please subscribe. I really appreciate you tuning in. One of the things I do want to touch on is and I just kind of want to, because I know Peter and I don't talk about it in the interview. For those that have not seen it, I strongly encourage anyone listening to this to look at the two separate stories, just how, I guess the word is out of touch, I think, Ned Lamont, our governor, is when it comes to reality. So the state is in fiscal crisis, right? We are nowhere closer to solving any of the problems that have put Connecticut in a consistent and constant downward spiral, adding no jobs. I mean, this has been a constant problem for, I'd say, since Democrats took over the governor's office. His focus right now is wanting to try to get a special, or actually I should say renovate his office because it's not up to his standards. Right. Okay. Mr. 1%. So it's not up to his standards. And he wants to put this special kind of wallpaper on. And because of it's an old building and there's plaster, it's not drywall, like there's all these issues. And he's like, well, I'll pay for it. Like not realizing like you're not governor forever. Like you can't just kind of make these decisions simply because you're going to pay for it. It's how he won the governorship. It's probably how he's done everything in his life. Let me just buy it. Let me just say I'm going to pay for it. And the other is that for some reason, and this is a let them eat cake moment. This is one of these moments of complete and utter delusional kind of where we are as a state and how people are feeling in this state and how just from an economic standpoint, the middle class are just being suffocated by policies that this governor and the Democrats have pushed. He's going to pay for a music festival in Woodstock, Connecticut, because, Woodstock, New York isn't honoring whatever the 50 years, whatever the anniversary is, I think, this year. So he's decided to pay for his own kind of Woodstock. And, he refers to himself as a music aficionado, I think, in one of the articles. And it's like, oh my God, I cannot. But anyway, it's just, this is what we're dealing with. And this is where I think as someone who was born and raised as someone who is middle class, my mother's a teacher, we have to talk to our friends who think that voting for Democrats actually means they're protecting the middle class. They're not. Remind them of how out of touch this guy is. He's looking to spend, God knows how much money renovating his office while he demands more out of our paychecks. And for fun, hey, let me throw my own Woodstock because, and literally this was the quote in the article, because he was only 14 when it happened, he missed out. So this is a big moment for this summer, not solving Connecticut's fiscal crisis, it's pretending that he's 14 again. The child in chief, Ned Lamont. Anyway, coming up next, Peter Schiff. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Here I have today joining me, Peter Schiff. Peter and I actually have known each other for about 10 years. I consider him a close friend. I'm so happy to have him joining me. And Peter, I know you had called me because there was a particular issue that you have and only the way that you could. You've looked at how this is going to impact business, and it's the FMLA, right? That the Family Medical Leave Act here in Connecticut. And you had talked about maybe writing an op-ed. I know that you've been on a couple of the radio shows, so I kind of wanted to just talk to you a little bit and tell our listeners exactly what this could mean for the state of Connecticut.
Well, it could be a complete disaster for the state. I mean, I think the good thing is it doesn't kick in for a few more years, so there's still the opportunity to get rid of it. And of course, once it kicks in and it is a complete disaster, potentially they can repeal it before it has a chance to do any more damage. But the risk is that they don't repeal it and they just jack taxes up dramatically to try to sustain the benefit, which obviously a lot of people are going to like, because it boils down to like 12 weeks of paid summer vacations for just about everybody who has a job in the state of Connecticut. And so, I mean, that's good, I guess, for the worker who can collect a paycheck without having to show up. But a lot of people are going to have a difficult time because when they go to the supermarket, there's no one going to be there. When they go to a restaurant, there's no one there. If they go to the gas station, any retailers, the workforce is going to be gone because they're all going to be
Well,
taking the summer off with pay.
Well, I was just gonna say the reason that I love when you do these analyses is, Peter, because you actually did the math, right? So explain to everyone, because it's not every employee, right? Like you actually broke this down in the most basic mathematical formula, which we know Democrats never do, right? That I always laugh when they want to talk about climate change and climate science when they haven't figured out basic math yet. So let's start with the math of
Yeah,
this.
and they don't understand
Um,
concepts like moral hazard and unintended consequences. All these things that sound good to liberals are always backfire. But the idea here is that you can take time off to bond with your newborn child or care for a sick family member.
Which is a good thing. That's a good thing, right? It's always how we execute, right? It's how we execute these quote unquote
Well, I
programs.
mean,
And I think
yeah,
you
I
and
mean,
I,
it's certainly a good thing if people want to bond with their newborn children or take care of sick relatives, but it's not something that the government should try to address with legislation. These decisions are better left to individuals to make on their own and decide with their own employers on a voluntary basis how they want to handle these things, because there's no such thing as a free lunch, but the politicians want to pretend that you can get all these benefits for free, and that doesn't work. But anyway, so what the law does is it provides a framework where if you have a need that calls for you to take the 12 weeks off, you could simply let your employer know that you're going to leave for 12 weeks. He can't retaliate against you. He can't fire you. He has to leave the job open so it's there for you 12 weeks later when you come back to work. Now, the idea though is that only people who really need the time off are going to take the leave. But that's nonsense, because when the government dangles a huge pot of money in front of people, they will organize their lives to qualify for that benefit. So if you look at the benefits, you're able to get 95% of your salary during the 12 weeks to a maximum of $900 a week. So obviously, if you make $10,000, $20,000 a week, and you take off 12 weeks, it's not really going to, bridge the gap for you. But for the vast majority of people who work in the state of Connecticut, $900 a week is plenty of money. I mean, if you make $50,000 a year, you basically make $960 a week at $50,000 a year. Now, there are a lot of people that make less than $50,000 a year, but take a guy that makes $50,000 a year. If he decides to go to work, he gets $960 a week. If he decides to take the leave, he gets $900 a week. It's almost the same thing. It's only $60 less, but you don't have to work. I mean, most people don't like working. They only work to get the money. But if you can get the money and skip the job, then that's what you're going
well,
to do.
well, and I know you had a conversation with one of my favorite state reps. He actually serves on our executive committee here at State Central, Mike France, about what constitutes quote unquote family leave. I think it's
Well,
the same federal standard,
they're
right?
using the same federal standard for what defines the medical need. But the problem is the federal law is unpaid leave. So there's a little bit of a check there on abuse. I mean, sure, some people that want to take long vacations can just lie and pretend that they have a medical reason, but they're not going to get paid. So there's not that many people that can afford to take 12 weeks without pay. And so there's a little bit of a check, although I'm sure there's some abuse going on. But when it comes to the Connecticut law, when you are going to pay people not to work, in fact, people are actually going to get paid more money not to work. Because if you think about it, if somebody has a job where they're making $50,000 a year, which is $960 a week, and they have to go to work every day, how much does it cost them to physically get back and forth from work every day? I'm sure they spend at least $60 a week in gas, But it's not just the gas. What about the cost of parking if they have any, the wear and tear on your car? Then, what about dry cleaning your
Right.
work clothes?
Right.
What about eating lunch in a restaurant because you're at work, you're not at home? I mean, there's a lot of costs that workers incur that they can't deduct, that in order to get a job. So if you don't have to go to work, not only do you save all that money, but you save all the time. You save the commuting time. You don't have to drive back and forth in traffic. You don't have to get up early in the morning and get ready. There are a
Right.
lot of women that
Right.
have to get up, an hour earlier to do all their hair, to do their makeup. I mean, it's getting ready for a job. You have to be looking in a certain way. And if you're just not going to go to work, you save all that time. But here's what I think is really going to happen for the state of Connecticut. I mean, we have, pretty, cold winters. So nobody is going to want to take their time off during the winters. Everybody is going to want to take their time off during the summer. But there's another reason for that. If you have young children who are in school during the summer, they're not at school. And, if you're not sending them away to camp, what are you doing with your young children during the summer? You need to have some type of daycare. You have to pay somebody to watch your kids when they're not at school and when you're at work. But if you could just take that time off, then not only do you not have to work and you actually make more money, but you can save all the cost of childcare. You can add that to the pile. So there's this huge incentive. And all you have to do, right, to qualify is you simply have to inform your employer that you want the time. And in order to get the time, basically you have to be bonding with a newborn child or an adopted child, which, will work for a lot of people who have kids. But if that's not the situation, all you have to do is claim that you're taking care of a sick family member. And a family member could be anybody who you deem a family member. It doesn't actually have to be relative. It could just be somebody that you feel is close enough to you that you consider them a family member. So it's a huge loophole. And of course, you also could take the time off if you have to deal with your own health issues. It's not just taking care of a family member, it's taking care of yourself. And if you look at the way they defined a serious medical
Sure.
condition, it
Sure.
includes mental. It's not just physical, it's mental. And those are the easiest things to fake. Oh, I have a lot of anxiety. I'm stressed out. I can't sleep.
Well, yeah.
Or I have a alcohol problem or drug problem, whatever it is. All you have to do is say that you're in therapy for whatever your problem is, and it qualifies.
Well,
And
and
I
I
don't
was
know, maybe they'll, yeah.
Well, I was just going to bring up the fact that you and I talked about this offline, is that there are doctors, and we see them in the news every day for these types of fraud, whether it's, so this already kind of exists, like with medical marijuana, whether it's overprescription of opioids. So there, I think with liberals, oftentimes I think of this in a vacuum, like there's this purity to the idea, but never actually thinking about the consequences of the fraud that can be involved, or how, hey, my cousin's a dentist and he's gonna say that I have to be out. That happens. And here's the other thing too, Peter. I don't know if you know this or not, but this last legislative session, food stamp fraud, it's a real thing, right? So all of these government programs always have some percentage of fraud, whether it's 10%, 15%, who knows? But at the end of the day, what happened, and this is the beauty of the Democratic Party here. The Democrats in Massachusetts actually recognized that they had a problem with food stamp fraud. And so they kind of changed some laws regulating where food stamps can take, where you take ATMs and all this other stuff. They realized, and this is, Connecticut doesn't even track this in a real way, but something like if you are on food stamps, how is it that you could be taking out cash from your EBT card at a hotel in Orlando, Florida, or Vegas, or on a cruise? And so when the Republicans in this state wanted to kind of not punish people who needed it, but people who were abusing it, the Democrats stood against protecting from abuse. And I have to be honest with you, I kind of agree with you here. I think that even if it's 10 or 15% from an abuse standpoint, that's taxpayer dollars. That is a big problem. It would be one thing if it was, yeah.
Yeah, all government programs like this are going to be abused. That's a reason why
Whether
that we
Social
should not
Security
have.
fraud, whether disability fraud, it already happens. It exists. So for Democrats to pretend it doesn't.
Well, the programs themselves are frauds. They're based on a fraud, and they're also based on the concept that it's, you've legitimized theft when the government is basically taking money from some people and giving it to other people. that is legalized theft. And so once you've kind of said that theft is morally okay, is, and so what's the difference between the government stealing money and individuals stealing money themselves? You're just cutting out the middleman. But that is a problem where uh, diminish morality in that way by saying that it's okay to steal things that don't belong to you. But, getting back to this problem of, people abusing 12 weeks of paid vacations. Look, that is a powerful incentive. Who wants to work June, July, and August when you can, hang out on the beach and play with your kids and have a good time? Most people don't enjoy their jobs. And this is an easy way to get out of working, but still get all the money that you would get if you showed up for work. And yeah, I mean, look how easy it is. The airlines basically have this rule that says that if you need an emotional support animal, if you have some type of problem flying and you're you're having anxieties, you can bring a dog on the plane. And, but before that, I mean, you could always bring a little dog, in one of those, carry-ons. But if you have a larger breed dog that doesn't fit in a little
Like
carry-on,
you have a shepherd, right? You have a German shepherd, I think, right?
well, I used to. We had to put him down.
I'm
We
sorry.
still we have a golden doodle. Yeah, he got cancer, stomach cancer, unfortunately. But the if you have a large animal, you have to check them like baggage. You have to, and it's hard. You have to come to the airport way in advance, and it's very
Right.
expensive to put them in a crate. But if you have an emotional support animal, you don't have to pay anything. You get them on the plane for free, and they sit right with you, they're in the aisle or in front of your seat. But so now they have all these doctors online. Just go online and, for $100, whatever it is, they'll give you this BS exam, and then you take it online, and then they give you a diagnosis that you need an emotional support animal. They send you the thing in the mail. They send you all the paraphernalia that you need, to put on your dog, a pat, little, and now no, your family pet becomes an emotional support dog, and the planes are full of dogs. But I mean, anybody could do this. You get a whole cottage industry around helping people, but you have to now think about it. What is it going to be like to operate a small business in the state of Connecticut when all your employees take the summer off? And how do you do that? How do you, hire temporary workers to work for the summer, train them, but they know they're going to be leaving, in a few weeks when your workforce comes back from vacation. And even if you're somebody who's kind of honorable, that doesn't want to cheat and is going to stay at the work and stay at their job, that guy is going to be overloaded with work because your boss now is going to expect a guy that doesn't leave to pick up the slack for everybody who's gone. And so, so that's an extra incentive. If everybody else is cheating, I might as well cheat too. There's no way the state is going to be able to enforce this, monitor this. Meanwhile, the only source of tax revenue to fund this is a 0.5% payroll tax. So a guy that's
which won't be enough.
Yeah, a guy that's making $50,000 a year is going to pay $250 in taxes, but qualify for $10,600 worth of annual benefits. So that's a great deal.
There's that pesky math again, right?
Yeah, that's a great deal. Now, so the question is the state going to collect enough money from the 1% who earn so much money that they can't afford to take the vacation? No, there's not enough people. And the payroll tax caps out where the Social Security limit is, which is around $125,000, $130,000 a year.
Right.
So the state is not going to. So what's the way the legislation is written? They can only pay out the benefits so long as they have the tax revenues, but they won't know that, for a full year because, they're not going to know how much it cost them until the year is over. So after the first year, they're going to blow through their numbers. The state's going to lose a fortune. And then the question is, what are they going to do? Are they going to cancel the program, or to preserve the program, are they going to jack up taxes way up there on the wealthier people who aren't taking the paid leave? Are they going to have a giant tax on higher income earners? And who knows how high that tax might have to be? It might have to be like a 10% or a 20% payroll surcharge or some, who knows? It's going to be a big number in order to maintain that freebie.
Well, there's two things too that part of this calculus based on how Democrats in the state have operated. You're also assuming, Peter, that the money that is dedicated for this tax will be put into the fund, right? The Democrats in Hartford have a nasty habit of diverting money out of the general fund or out of tax collection before it actually gets into
Oh,
what it's intended for. So you're assuming
oh, of
100%
course.
collection, right? Which I don't think it will be. I think this is just a way that they can try to get a little bit more tax collection,
Oh, yeah.
and then
The-
it's going to be even worse. And they'll probably try to bond on future revenues, probably.
oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, JR, I mean, the tax starts a year before the benefits
Right,
kick in.
right.
So before they kick in, the state's going to blow through that money. So it's going to spend that money
Before it even
for a
goes,
year. And so,
absolutely.
right. And so by the time people start putting in for their benefits, the money's already going to be gone.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just trying to get some extra tax revenue. But, the other thing is the idea that the government should be layering businesses with onerous requirements with respect to their employees is a terrible principle. It's a terrible idea because
Yeah.
you want jobs, right? All these politicians pretend they're for jobs. They want jobs. They want good jobs. Well, where do jobs come from? They come from employers. Somebody has to create a
Right.
job for there to be one. And in order for an employer to provide a job, he needs capital, he needs savings, he needs all sorts of things. He needs tools to give the workers. But as you start layering on all these requirements and responsibilities, if you hire somebody, you must do this, you must do that, you have to pay this,
Right.
you have to pay that. What you're doing is you're making it more expensive to hire people and create jobs, and you're creating incentives to avoid creating jobs. So clearly what a lot of Connecticut employers are going to do to try to avoid being in a predicament where, their workers are leaving for so long is to try to have as few workers as possible if they don't leave the state altogether, which is automation. You have to try to invest
Right.
in computers and or robots or
Well,
outsourcing or find ways for people to help themselves. Like, I guess if you have a restaurant and everybody orders through kiosks, then it doesn't matter if your waiters and waitresses take the summer off because you don't have them, because you've already replaced them with self-service kiosks. So, that's going to happen, more and
well,
more, so that employers don't have to worry about what they do when their workers are gone because they try not to have any workers in the first place.
Well, what's funny too is that the irony to the whole myth of the Democrats being against the 1% and against corporations. Frankly, all their policies do is help bolster major corporations from staying in business because the threshold for us. So if you and I wanted to start a restaurant, Peter, and the cost for us to start our business is so astronomical here in Connecticut that it's so much easier for, say, a national chain who's already got the attorneys, they've already got the permits, they've already got all this stuff established, and so they just open another restaurant. And it's the same for groceries. It's the same for local shops. These policies put out mom and pop businesses
Oh,
every
that
day, every
that's what
day.
people don't understand, that big government favors big business,
Yeah,
right? Because it's only the bigger businesses that have the economies of scale to deal with all the regulations. So yeah, you
correct.
stymie entrepreneurship, you make it harder for small businesses to get started and for
Minimum
small
wage is another
businesses to
higher
grow.
minimum wage that's a prime example of what's going to put a lot of mom and pops out of business. That
Yeah. Plus also the minimum wage law benefits high skilled workers. It benefits
right.
labor unions at the expense of lower skilled workers. That's why labor unions support the minimum wage. It's not that people who are members of organized
No.
labor, they don't get the minimum wage.
Their
They're
contracts are
they're getting a
negotiated from the
much higher.
floor. Right.
They're much higher. Here's this the secret of why big labor supports the minimum wage, and people don't get the minimum wage is the worst possible law you can have from respect to workers, right? It always annoys me when I see Republicans trying to oppose an increase in the minimum wage because they say it's going to be bad for business. That's not the way to do it. I mean, businesses could survive, right? They can automate, they can fire workers. What you need to say is a higher minimum wage is
It's
bad
true.
for workers because it limits their choices. It makes it harder for workers to get a job. It makes it harder for workers to get on the job training, particularly if you're younger and you don't have any skills and you want to get your first
There's
job
less of
and you
them.
want to climb on that job ladder. The minimum wage, the higher the minimum wage is, the harder it is to jump on that ladder because the bottom rung is above your ability to get to it. So it's if you're an individual worker, you should have a right to accept the best job you can find. And if the highest wage that anybody is willing to pay me, because I don't have a lot of skills, if the highest wage I could find is $8 an hour, the government shouldn't say you can't accept that job. You have to stay unemployed. You have to find an employer to pay you $12 an hour. And if you can't get a job for $12 an hour, then you can't work. And so my only alternative is welfare or crime, right? That's not right. But here's a good example of how this works. Let's say that I'm a skilled worker and I am a fence builder, and I'm a unionized skilled worker. I'm highly trained. I'm very efficient, and I charge $20 an hour to make fences. Well, let's say unskilled workers who don't have a lot of skills, who are much slower. Let's say they work for $6 an hour. Well, let's say I can hire three of these guys at $6 an hour. That's $18 an hour, and they could do the same work as one skilled guy who charges $20 an hour. Well, I can save $2 an hour by hiring these three unskilled workers, right, and let them do it. Now, here's what happens. The skilled guy is upset that these unskilled workers are working for $6 an hour and putting him out of a job. So what he does is he calls up his friend in Hartford and says, this is terrible, right? This is terrible. All these fence builders are being exploited, right? They're only getting $6 an hour. That's unfair. You can't raise a family on $6 an hour, which is true, but they probably don't have any families. They're probably young and they still live with their parents. But the guy says, this is terrible. Let's pass a minimum wage law. Let's require $8 an hour. This is terrible. 6 is not enough. We need 8. Right? And so we pass the minimum wage and says, okay, $8 an hour. Well, now if I have to pay each guy $8 an hour, 3 times 8 is 24. Right? Well, now it's cheaper to pay the skilled guy $20 an hour.
Right.
So because of the increase in minimum wage, these 3 unskilled workers get fired, and now I use the one high-skilled worker instead. And, that is the real motivation behind it. In fact, if you go back to the origins,
it's to prevent, it was to prevent African Americans from being hired. That's exactly. Yeah, that's exactly.
The very first minimum wage was blacks were willing to work for less money. That was one way they were able to overcome discrimination.
Right.
And the fact that they didn't have as much skills.
Yep.
Yeah, they worked for less money. And so employers were hiring a lot of black workers, and the white unions didn't like it. And the way they stopped it was by saying we need a minimum wage.
Yeah.
And the minute they got the minimum wage, they stopped hiring blacks. So it's a racist law. And at least back then, people understood what it did. It causes unemployment. It prevents certain people from having access to the job market. So all these politicians, they pass these minimum wage laws and they feel good about themselves as if they're raising people's wages. They're not. They're destroying people's dreams. They're destroying people's lives by permanently barring people from ever entering the labor force.
Well, what's funny about that, Peter, the other 2 caveats to this is that the unions also negotiate from the floor. So if an unskilled laborer gets $15 an hour, and as an electrician, as a skilled laborer, I'm entitled to 55% higher than an unskilled laborer. That's also why they like the minimum wage, because they negotiate their contracts from it. But the other thing that I've talked about, if you're a dental hygienist who's non-unionized and you make $49,000 a year, minimum wage goes into effect. You didn't get a raise. So everyone that's making $8 an hour that goes to $15 an hour, they feel great, right? They got a couple more dollars in their pocket, if they still have their jobs, of course.
Yes.
But they have a couple more bucks in their pocket. They think everything's going to be great. But what they don't recognize is the adjustment in price, right? So what happens is their lives stay exactly where they were because bread's more expensive, milk's more expensive, everything they're doing is more expensive. But that person making $49,000 a year who didn't get a raise, now all of a sudden their purchasing power decreases. It's harder for them to save money. It's harder for them to pay off loans, and because now they're paying higher prices to satisfy the minimum wage, and it actually makes the middle class poorer. It's so frustrating when you try to have the conversation with people about why this is such a bad economic
everybody
policy.
Forgets that, again, there's no free lunch. So whenever they raise the minimum wage, certain things happen. Number one, some people lose their jobs. So they have their wage reduced to 0.
Yeah.
So they don't get a raise. They get a pink slip, right? So they're out of work. Then there are some people who don't lose their job, but they get a raise. Okay, those people think they're a winner. But now here's what happens. All the businesses that now have to pay higher wages as a cost of doing business, Now, all those businesses pass on those higher
Right.
costs
Yep.
to their customers. And so the people who are most affected by this are the lower income and middle income workers who spend all their money. They don't have a lot of savings. They don't make a lot of investments. And so when the cost of food goes up, when the cost of all the services that they need goes up, that just diminishes the value of the raise that they just got. So they're not actually making any progress. People who are very wealthy aren't as affected by an increase in minimum wage
Right.
because they don't really care if the cost of an apple goes up. I mean, they don't care what difference it makes. But if you are, clipping coupons and living paycheck to paycheck, and now the cost of everything you buy goes up, that impacts you. So the
Yeah.
people who earn the minimum wage are the ones that are most affected by the higher prices that are the result of the minimum wage.
Correct.
And people don't even realize this, that, everybody is an employer. Even if they don't have employees, whenever you do something, you're employing people, or, if I go and get my hair cut, right, I'm basically employing a barber
Employing
to
the
cut my
barber.
hair,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. True.
If I have to get my car fixed, I have to go and employ a mechanic. If I have a
Right.
problem at my toilet overflows, I call a plumber. I'm employing that plumber. And if that plumber's wages go up, right? If the mechanic's wages go up, then it costs me more when I need a plumber, when I
Right.
need a mechanic.
Yeah.
I'm paying all that, So
Right.
people forget these are just costs. And the reality is we all want the costs to go down so that we could buy stuff for less money.
Yeah, it's great. Well, and here's the other thing too, Peter, and I just kind of want to end on this is that you are someone who is a prime example of what happens when a state just goes completely bonkers with its economic policies. Because and I love when I listen to Democrats say, "Oh, we're not losing residents here in Connecticut." You are someone who left Connecticut because of the economic problems here,
Yes.
and I don't blame you, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I left. I'm no longer a resident like so many people. And if you remember, when I ran for Senate, what used to be frustrating for me in 2010, I would meet people and they would tell me, "Oh, I really support you. I wish I could vote for you, but I live in Florida." Right? I'm only here for the summertime. They're snowbirds. Well, now I'm one of those people, right?
Right.
My residence is not it's not Connecticut. Now, I didn't go to Florida. I was going to go to Florida. I almost bought a house there. I was very close, although I owned one house for my mom, which I got rid of. But I was going to move there myself until I found out about Puerto Rico. So I ended up moving there instead. But I still have the home in Connecticut that I was living in. I just use it as a summer home. But yeah, we were talking before the podcast about how much value, without getting into prices, I can tell you that I bought my house at the end of 2009, right? So, and the guy who
which was the
sold it
right
to
time
me,
to buy. I was just saying, it's the right time to buy in terms of the markets, right? That was a point where the
well, I don't know. I mean, I think the markets went a little lower, but I wasn't trying to time the markets.
right.
I had
Yeah.
rented the house for a year.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
And then I was in the middle of the campaign, really. I didn't feel like moving, and I ended up buying the place. And I bought it for maybe 60 or 70% less than it was originally listed for, because it was on the market for a while. And I mean, so the guy,
Right.
and the guy sold it to me for probably about half of what he paid.
He lost on it. Yeah.
in 2002, right? And that didn't count the money he spent improving the
Right.
property. He spent a lot of money fixing up the grounds and
Right.
doing things. So anyway, I bought the place in 2009, end of 2009. And I also spent a lot of money improving the place. I mean, much more than he did. I mean, the place is much nicer now. I did a lot of work. But had I not done any work, right, had I just kept the property the way it was, based on the current market, I would say the house, if I were to sell it right now, I would probably sell it for 60 to 70% less than it originally sold for in 2002. And this is what, 18 years later? To
Yeah.
have that kind of depreciation. And with the money I put into it, I could probably get now maybe a little bit more than I paid.
And that doesn't include taxes and any of that other stuff,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh, my taxes. Yeah. Oh, shoot, the taxes are $60,000 plus a year. I mean, I'm paying every 9 years. It costs me another $500,000. And, and then of course, it's not just the taxes. I got to maintain the property. Right. I just put a new roof in after this winter. But I mean, you have to do the grounds. I got to get the snow removal, the gardening. I mean, it costs a lot of money for me to maintain this property. But the interesting point is that look how much property values in Fairfield County have
Yes.
declined. Why is that? Why are houses today literally less money than they were 20 years ago? 20 years
It's true.
ago. I mean, why? And in fact, there's a vacant lot right next to my house, which I would buy if I really was living here. But I don't want, it's another couple of acres. I would just as soon have it. But A, I don't want to pay the taxes on it because it would just give me, I pay another $12,000 a year in taxes just to have the vacant land. But I would adjoin it to my property if I was here. But that land has been for sale probably for 6, 7 years. And nobody will build on it because if you were to build on that land, there's no way you can make money. If you got that land for free
Right.
and then built a house on it, you could not sell that house for the cost of constructing
Right.
it. That's how bad the market is. You can buy houses in Fairfield County for less than it would cost you to build them, and if you got the land for free.
No,
Why is that?
you'd have to build
Because
a
people
900
are,
square foot of, yeah, it'd have to be this tiny little, house.
but nobody would, but
No one
nobody
would
would
want
buy
it.
it.
Right.
Who would want that? So the question is, and Fairfield County is a great place to live. It's beautiful. It's close to New York City. There's so many good things about it. Why is real estate collapsing
Yeah.
and that's with mortgage rates at ridiculously low levels.
Yeah.
You know, you look at what's happening in, my brother had bought a place in Brooklyn, and that place has probably doubled in price during the time where mine has been cut in half here, right? So
Yeah.
why is that? It's because people want out of the state. People are leaving. That's all the proof you need. You can't give away a house in Fairfield County because nobody wants to move here and people want to leave. But the people who don't want to live here anymore and the people who are leaving are the employers. These are the people who pay
Right.
higher taxes. They're
Right.
mobile and they're leaving.
Yeah.
And so these are the people the state needs. They're the employers. They're the taxpayers. And the state doesn't seem to get it because all they want to do when they look at the budget, it's like, oh, we need more money. Let's raise taxes.
Well, the line,
So now they raise taxes, right? And now the people paying the taxes leave. So now the tax base is even smaller. They didn't get as much revenue as they thought by the tax increase because the people they wanted to tax left the state. And now they have to keep raising taxes on the people who stay in the state, creating even bigger incentives
Yeah.
for them to leave, right? It's
Well,
a self-perpetuating spiral.
well, it's funny when you talk about the tax revenue, they've completely misread the tea leaves on, and you and I have talked about this off air too, where Connecticut's actually generated a decent in terms of tax returns. But the problem is it's all centered around the stock market, which is because of, and we can talk about, and I know where you are on the stock, but in terms of capital gains tax, the state has been able to plug some holes. The reality though is that tax receipts have not been growing because of employment tax or people paying income tax. It's all because of what, people selling out of the stock market and all the hedge funds down
the
at Stanford
next
and Greenwich.
bear market is going to be brutal for the state of Connecticut, especially I'm right, especially if we have a bear market in a recession where tax receipts go down and if inflation drives mortgage rates higher. If we have stagflation, if we have a recession where mortgage rates go up, I mean, it's going to be a complete collapse of this state.
It's going to be bad.
And look, the state again is going to think, oh, we can solve this problem by higher taxes. You can't because they're going to raise taxes and they're going to get less tax revenue. What they have to do is dramatically reduce government spending. But they have a problem with doing that because all the money is being spent on the voters who keep reelecting these same politicians. I mean, they're basically bribing the electorate. You have all these people who work for the state of Connecticut, all these people who are, getting these huge benefits, salaries, pensions that are voting in the politicians that promise never to stop the gravy train. and they're going to keep picking the pockets of the residents who are dumb enough to stay here. And so they're destroying this state. It's like the government is like a cancer on the state. And you have more and more people trying to pick the pockets of a smaller group. And soon they're all going to be gone. And then, what are you going to do when all the employers are gone and the taxpayers are gone and you just got a bunch of state employees with nobody to tax because the government can only pay the taxes of their employees and their retirees if they have private sector workers to tax. But if they tax all the private sector workers and businesses out of the state, then where do they get the
There's
money?
nothing left.
And
Yeah, no,
they should have
it's
got
true.
the message, JR, with the elimination of the SALT deductions, because at least for a while, higher income people could deduct the income taxes and property taxes on their federal
Right.
returns. They can't deduct that anymore, which means they have
Yeah.
to pay the full weight of these local taxes.
Well, that actually brings me to another point, which I thought was hysterical. There was a group of quote unquote millionaires who were saying to the state of Connecticut, "We can pay higher taxes." And what made me laugh about that, Peter, and what I've said before, is I don't want to hear from a millionaire or a billionaire who's claiming that they can pay higher in taxes until they show me their tax returns. Right? Show me that you haven't written off everything you possibly could over the last few years, because you certainly have the choice to never take a deduction. And I guarantee any of these people claiming that and of course they're liberal, anytime that they're saying, and this is a group that's starting, by the way, out there, and I think they're starting nationally, where, oh, we want to pay more. Show me before you even utter a sentence like, I'm willing to pay higher taxes, show me you're not taking a single deduction.
Oh,
and I guarantee they are.
Yeah, look. Every wealthy Democrat that I know, number one, they hire accountants and tax attorneys to do their taxes.
Correct.
Why don't they just do them themselves?
Right.
I mean, just pay. The only reason that people hire accountants and pay them money is because they believe that they're going to save them money, because they're going to know about all the deductions. If any rich people are out there and they want to pay more taxes, go right ahead and write a check.
Right.
The government will take donations.
Correct.
You can pay whatever you want. You can pay 100% if you want. Just write a check and send it on in. Even on the federal taxes. Look, I used to have a client, JR. I don't want to mention his name out of just courtesy, but I had a client, very liberal Democrat.
I know who it is, but I won't say who. I know who it is, but yeah.
So he eventually became a member of the U.S. Congress. He's not there anymore, but he was one of the wealthiest members of Congress when he was there. Anyway, I used to talk to this guy. We had a good relationship, and we used to have a lot of political arguments. He's very liberal, and
You made him a lot of money too.
He made a lot of money himself. I can't even take credit. I mean, he had one stock he bought. He probably put like in Indonesia. I think he put under $1 million in it, and he cashed out for 30 million 10 years later. So it's a true trade.
Yeah.
But anyway, but the guy had a lot of money, right? But every year, he would always call me up in December. I need tax losses. What can I sell? I need tax losses because I don't, I want to minimize my taxes. And I would always say to him, I said, why? I mean, you're such a big liberal. Why do you want to pay less? Why are you trying to figure out ways to lower your tax burden?
You can afford it, right? You can afford it, yeah.
But this guy was the cheapest guy when it came to his own taxes. He didn't want to pay one dime in taxes that he didn't have to pay. He didn't care. Liquidate all my losers. I need to shield my winners. I don't want, and I mean, without a doubt, I mean, he was the most aggressive harvester of tax losses of any of my clients, because he didn't want to pay a dime that he didn't have to, even though publicly, he's talking about how, everybody has to pay so much.
Saying that Peter Schiff needs to pay more. Right? That's what he's claiming
by name. But this is it. They call these guys limousine liberals. They're out there and they drum up these guys. These compassionate millionaires, patriotic millionaires, whatever the hell they're calling themselves.
Show me your tax returns is what I'd say.
The worst thing you could do with your money, if you're a millionaire, is give it to the government. I mean, what are they going to do? They're just going to waste it. I mean, first of all, if you want to be charitable with your money, then donate it. Because if you look at the government collects, for every dollar they collect in money, maybe 10 cents get to people who need the money. I mean, it's the most inefficient way of transferring money to the poor. Private charities, it's the opposite. They collect $1 and they take 10 cents and 90 cents goes to the charity. So if you want to give your money away, why do it through government? But more importantly, I think that society is better served not simply by gifting your money away, but investing it productively. Start businesses, produce products, provide services, create jobs that make people's lives better, that raise their standard of living, right? Yeah. Wealthy people do more to help society by inventing things and pioneering things and coming up with better and cheaper ways to do things and investing. And, a lot of these small startups, right? You have a lot of young people have good ideas. They want to start businesses. Where do they get the capital to do that if they don't have it themselves? They got to find some wealthy person who's
Yeah.
going to invest the money? Well, if the government takes all the money before, where's the savings going to come from? Where's the capital investment going to come from? So this is a bunch of nonsense. You got these successful
It's true.
people that are saying we should give our money to government. I mean, government doesn't create success, right? Government is a big
It's true.
inhibitor. So but it's all this media hype that, oh, I'm patriotic. I want to pay more taxes. It's a bunch of nonsense, right? And
I agree with you.
we already pay high taxes. At one point in America, before the income tax was started, there was no income tax at all. How did the United States make it to 1913 with no income tax? And we had no Social Security tax until the 1930s. And the state of Connecticut had no income tax. If you lived in Connecticut in 1900, you paid no federal income tax. You paid no state income tax. You paid no Social Security tax. But the state was here. We were fine. We did a lot better without all these taxes.
Well, since the state of Connecticut implemented the income tax, we've actually, I don't think that we've grown our economy. And it's 91. No, and that's a real stat. I think it's been like under 1%, I think, since 1991. There's almost the same number of jobs since we implemented the income tax. And frankly, when you look at the jobs that have added to offset the jobs that have been lost, it's government jobs, right? And this is the miscalculation. I've gotten in an argument with people before and I appreciate, so, my mother was a teacher, right? And I appreciate her intrinsic value to society. Okay. But at the end of the day, when it comes to taxes, what she earns and what she pays is not that's not a true balance, right? And that's what you talk about when you said the state employees, that's all that's going to be left here, but you need more than that. So,
well, yeah, plus state employees don't pay state income taxes. I mean, they make it look like they pay because they do have to pay the tax. But if you're paying the tax to the person who pays your salary, you're not really paying a tax. It's just it's like the state is just taking some of what they gave you back. So the state can't tax its own workers.
Well, and
because the paychecks are, if the state is paying somebody $50,000 and then taking back $5,000 in taxes, they're not getting anything. It's like they're paying the worker $45,000. The only way to fund the state is by taxes on the private sector.
Correct. Yeah. Well,
but the private sector is being destroyed by the high taxes.
Well,
businesses are leaving so as to avoid them.
Well, the other thing that's amazing about how, and this is what's interesting about the left, like they always preach to be against the police or these government forces, but they actually use those forces in order to do tax collection. And one of the things that is, and I don't even know if you know this, Peter, but like my mother, who's a teacher, right? She has a teacher's pension, but she's barred from collecting Social Security because she was a teacher. She had other jobs that paid into Social Security that she's not entitled to. It's crazy the way that to your point about like that's theft. My mother paid into Social Security, but is ineligible to collect any of it because she wasn't just a teacher. She had other jobs. She's not entitled to that money. It's insane the way it works.
But she still had to pay the taxes when she worked those other jobs.
Correct. Yeah.
Look, we shouldn't even have Social Security. That's a whole
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, that's a whole other story. So, but yeah, and of course, that's another place the politicians, they always appeal to, we need to pay the teachers more. We need to pay the teachers are underpaid. And,
I think they are underpaid. What I think are overpaid are the administrators, right? Not the ones dealing with the students. That's my opinion.
We obviously have too much in the way of administration. We have too many vice principals and too many bureaucrats. But even the teachers themselves, when people are always comparing what teachers make to what other people make with comparable degrees. I mean, first of all, an education degree is a pretty easy degree to get. I mean, it's very unchallenging.
Well,
it's a Mickey Mouse. Yes, it is. It's not.
I don't know. I don't know that I agree on. I don't know if I agree on that one. But I would rather.
Here's my point, though. The teachers are not working 12 months a year. They get the summers off. And they generally don't work long hours like people might do in other professions. So there's a lot of free time that teachers get. There's a value to that. You have to put a monetary value on that to really look at what teachers are making because they're getting these vacations and they could take second jobs like your mom did, or they could just enjoy the leisure. But also teaching is a rewarding job. I mean, it's a job that I think has more satisfaction than a lot of other jobs. So you have to have a value of that, to have the fact that you're doing something that you like and that you enjoy versus doing a job that you don't like, but maybe pays more money. So I think there's a lot to be said for what teachers are making. But I think what is true is that there are some teachers that are underpaid. There are some really good teachers based on the teachers unions. There are some really good teachers that are underpaid, but
Oh, that's
the
fair.
vast
Right.
majority of lousy teachers are being overpaid. And that's what the unions do. They protect the jobs of the bad teachers, and the losers are the kids, right? Because I would rather have excellence in our
Yeah.
schools. I would rather have the better teachers rewarded and the bad teachers fired. But the only way to do that is to get the government out of education and have private schools where you have a profit motive and competition, because that's how you get excellence. That's how you get high quality and low cost, through a private sector, through the free market with competition and profit. Because whenever the government delivers a service, it's a lousy job. It costs a lot of money and it stinks because
Well,
there is no free market forces at
I
operating.
Well, no, I understand the profit motive and how, and I believe in charter schools and school choice and all those other things. But I will tell you, Peter, just from a perspective of having, with my mother, the societal and cultural changes that they've pushed on teachers through some of these mandates and what they're requiring them to do. It's not like it was 20, 30 years ago. And my problem is that you have, like, for example, in my high school that I grew up in, there's 55 kids that graduated. The superintendent staff, I mean, they're staffed more. And then the problems in a classroom like where I grew up are so much more, where you're dealing with kids who are, that are trouble kids. But here's and this is where what I want to say, Peter, is, first of all, it's great catching up with you. I always love having these conversations with you. And I'm so happy that you're still fighting for the state of Connecticut. I have to tell you, it's still one of my favorite, and although we were unsuccessful, it's one of my favorite campaigns. And to me, it was still the best campaign slogan that I've ever come up with, or that I've been a part of coming up with, which was the Schiff happens. And I don't think I'll ever forget that experience working on that campaign. And I do appreciate the opportunity of having worked with you. And I'm happy
Yeah,
that
and
we
I'm
stayed
glad
friends for
that
all these
you were
years.
able to continue a career here and fighting the fight. To try to save Connecticut from itself. I mean, Connecticut is it
I'm trying, Peter.
is its own worst enemy here. But what I wanted to finish up though on the teachers is that, look, there's a lot of there's some good teachers that are trapped in a bad system, and that's what's unfortunate. But looking
Yeah,
at
that's fair.
looking where in the town that I'm in, I know that 90% of my tax revenue that I pay, right, goes to support the schools. And I have no kids in
Yeah.
the schools here, and I never will, right? So I don't have any kids in the school, yet I'm paying these ridiculously high property taxes in order to maintain the schools. But I think that if we had private schools instead of public schools, they would be a lot more efficient and the taxes would be a lot lower. And one of the biggest drags on property values in the state of Connecticut is the high property taxes. And, the lower the property values go, the higher the property taxes have to be in relation to the value. And then what happens is these high property taxes are a barrier. People don't want to buy a house in Orange County, in Fairfield County, because of the cost of the property tax. It's like, I can't afford the property tax. I can't
It's
buy
part
it.
of it.
And so the price
Yeah.
has to come down low enough to compensate for the high property tax. So the higher you make property taxes, the lower you drive property values in the state. And so, people, they don't realize if they were able to operate the schools in a more efficient manner so that they could reduce the taxes, property values would rise sharply, because now the properties wouldn't be burdened by that obligation. That I have to pay all these taxes. I think about
Yeah.
selling the place just to get out from under the liability. I know I'm going to take a big loss, and now it's going to be even bigger now that they have this so-called mansion tax, right? They're going to put a 2% tax if I sell the house,
Right.
which
It's true.
simply reduces the value of the house even further, because anybody who buys the house from me knows that when
Right.
they buy it, they're going to have to pay the tax when they sell it. All the taxes simply take away from the value of the property. And so property prices, but I do love spending time in the state. It is still a pretty state. I have a lot of good memories of this house. And since I'm no longer paying any income taxes, not only don't I pay the state income tax now, I don't pay the federal income tax because I live in Puerto Rico. So I basically pay 4% tax on what I earn, and I pay no capital gains taxes. So I'm saving lots of money. So from that perspective, I've got the extra money to cover the property costs, the maintenance costs of this house. But I feel for a
Right.
lot of people
Right.
that are still
Right.
struggling with the U.S. tax system. And by the way, if this recession that I think is coming hits before 2020, the Democrats are going to get in there in the White House, and they are going to jack federal taxes way up. They're going to be much higher than they were when Trump took office, corporate taxes, individual taxes.
It's true.
And I don't think they're going to actually put the SALT deductions back on. I think, as much as, because I think that would be perceived as a giveaway to the rich. So they don't care, so I think they're just going to jack taxes up.
Correct.
And it's going to be that much more difficult for people that have to pay these taxes to survive in the state. And, they're going to be leaving.
Well, listen, Peter, I appreciate it. And one of the things that I've always said is that here in the state of Connecticut, the Democratic Party doesn't look at us as residents. They look at us like revenue sources. And you were a prime example of you were a revenue source, and now you're no longer a resident. So as always,
they still get the property tax, but they would get that from anybody, right? If I sold my house. But yeah, they're no longer. So I feel a little freer, though, when I'm walking around now in the summers when I'm here. I'm emancipated. I'm not a slave on a plantation here. Where because no matter how high, if Connecticut raises the state income tax to 10% or 15%, it doesn't affect me other than the fact that it drives the value of my house down even more, because if somebody lives in it, then they have to pay the higher income tax. But no matter what these idiots do, they can't tax me anymore. I'm not their piggy bank anymore. But I feel bad for the people who are. And I think it would be great if you and the people in the Republicans could somehow take back this state, and do what needs to be done, right? To clean house in Hartford and actually get rid of all this government. I mean, Connecticut is in a great location next to some high tax states. We could be a refuge. We could be a tax haven for the Northeast. And we can have all the jobs. We can have all the opportunity. All these people that work for the state of Connecticut should be working for private businesses instead. That way, the taxpayers wouldn't have to foot the bill. So we need more private companies, which means we need fewer regulations. We need lower taxes, right? But they're doing the opposite.
Peter, you're preaching to the choir, and I hope. Maybe one day when we do take control, we can get you to come back, but who knows? We'll try, certainly. But again, I appreciate you joining me as always, and thank you. Keep up the fight.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody who's listening to this who voted for me back in 2010. I got a lot more votes than people thought I was going to get.
I know.
I think if people thought I had a chance, they would have voted for me, because a lot of people told me, look, I didn't think you could win. You were so low in the polls, so I voted for the lesser of the other two evils. So they either voted for Linda or they voted for Rob. But they would have preferred me if they could have picked somebody.
Well, thank you very much, Peter.
It's just as well for me that I didn't go to Washington. It would have been a very frustrating experience.
It would have been. But thank you, Peter. Appreciate it.
All right. Keep up the good work, Jer.
All right. Bye.